This brings me to the whole issue of the economic impact of all of it, and the lasting economic impact of slavery altogether on and racial policies that started from redlining and through all kinds of other the drug policy and so forth that have affected black communities disproportionately, and just to repair that damage would require substantial reparation, not to mention compensation for the grief and pain that it has caused to generations of African Americans. And Melissa, what's important? Why it's important? What the president says is it's not just words. It's also what he's prepared to do, what the administration is prepared to do now to rectify some of these things. And let's listen to what he has so far come up with.
Studies, records, and accounts, the likely number is much more in the multiple of hundreds. Untold bodies dumped into mass graves. Families who at a time waited for hours, $100,000, but they don't have the money to provide and build those laboratories. So guess what? Instead of consigning millions of American children to under-resourced schools, let's dollars in federal contracts for everything from refurbishing decks of aircraft carriers and installing railings in federal buildings to professional services. We have a thing called, I won't go into it all, but there's not enough time now, but I'm determined to use every taxpayer's dollar that is assigned to me to spend going to American companies and American workers that build American products. And as part of that, I'm going to increase the share of the dollars the federal government spends to small disadvantaged businesses, including black and brown small businesses. Right now it calls for 10%. I'm going to move that to 15% of every dollar spent will be spent for that. I have the authority to do that. Just imagine, instead of denying millions of entrepreneurs the ability to access capital and contracting, we made it possible to take their dreams to the marketplace to create jobs and invest in our communities. The data shows young black entrepreneurs are just as capable of succeeding given the chance as white entrepreneurs are. But they don't have lawyers, they don't have accountants, but they have great ideas. Does anyone doubt this whole nation would be better off from the investments those people make? And I promise you, that's why I set up this National Small Business Administration that's much broader, because they're going to get those loans. Instead of consigning millions of American children to under-resourced schools, let's get each and every child 3 and 4 years old access to school, not daycare, school. In the last 10 years, studies have been done by all the great universities. It shows that it will increase by 56% the possibility of a child, no matter what background they come from, no matter what. If they start school at 3 years old, they have a 56% chance of going all through all 12 years without any trouble and being able to do well. And a chance to learn and grow and thrive in a school and throughout their lives. And let's unlock more than an incredible creativity and innovation that will come from the nation's historically black colleges and universities. No, I have a $5 billion a year program giving them the resources to invest in research centers and laboratories in high-demand fields to compete for good-paying jobs in industries of the future like cybersecurity. The reason why they don't, their students are equally able to learn as well and get the good-paying jobs that start at $90,000 and $100,000, but they don't have the money to provide and build those laboratories. So guess what? They're going to get the money to build those laboratories. So instead of just talking about infrastructure, let's get about about the business of actually rebuilding roads and highways, filling the sidewalks and cracks, installing streetlights and high-speed internet.
So the thing is, obviously, and he's also mentioned that they're focusing on housing, which is a big issue of wealth gap, and they're with Marsha Fudge in place. They're taking a hard look at that, and hopefully there's going to be a lot of changes in this direction as well. Cracking down on redlining, which is still taking place in places like co-ops in New York, if you believe it or not. And in Long Island, there's been recently a big bust where they investigated the real estate industry, and they found discrimination and red steering, and that's still taking place in spite of laws that are in place. So
well, there's a lot of racism that's under the table and not seen. There's it's not popular to bring it out. So if you suffer from that condition, you're going to hide it. So.
Yes. But it definitely is encouraging that the administration is attempting to take bites at that. And one of the things that they've done recently was divert the prison industry away from private prisons. They've also the upcoming checks for the COVID checks, the corona checks in the upcoming rounds are going to be distributed over the remainder of the year and cover $3,600 and be specifically designed to help people with children, which again is indirectly having an effect not only on general population wealth gap, but also on minority population wealth gap. Let's look at the recent studies that were done. In 2013, there was a study where you could see the median wealth of whites compared to blacks and compared to Hispanics on the right side, and you could see that there's a huge gap. There's 12 times. There was 12 in 2013. It was 12 times more for whites than black people. The average net wealth gap between white and black households is $800,000. That's based on a survey of consumer
I have a comment to make on this slide.
Yes.
I was going through this deck and I noticed this and I wondered, wait a minute, how can this be? Because, hey, I don't have $800,000.
This is why it's average.
What?
Yes.
Here's where
that's why it's average of net wealth, and that includes.
Well, yeah, but I know, and some very rich people could skew things, but that's not my point really. Is the point I wanted to get to was where could that statistic come from that would make sense? And I realized house ownership.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
And that's probably it, because through the years, black families have been one way or another discouraged from owning a home, and owning a home is one way the middle class America saves money. That's where you put your asset. So retire, you sell it, you move somewhere. If you live that dream, you're lucky enough, whatever. And that's something that's really been denied Black America. So
yeah, and
when I first saw that slide, I said, wait a minute, nobody even has the average person doesn't even have $800,000. So how could this be? Then I realized it had to be coming from the housing.
And keep in mind that the greatest disparity is at the top of the at the top of the scale, where there is 400 richest families in the U.S. Own more than they own 3.5% of wealth compared to 3% by 10 million African American households. So
Yes, the
yeah, that's
stuff at
just
the top
incredible.
end screws up all the statistics.
Yeah, so the top skews it a lot. Of course, everybody is affected by that, not just black communities, but nevertheless, there's a really good, and I'll post that video also. Professor Tricia Rose explains beautifully how all of these policies, starting from housing, and a lot of it has to do with housing, all joins together and is an integral system in which there's a disparity or discrimination against African American communities because the way neighborhoods were redlined and black neighborhoods created, ghettos created and formed, and the way they have an advantageous tax assessment on the locally in these neighborhoods where they're paying much more than that, or if you're a driver, you pay more on insurance if you live in a ghetto than if you live in a white neighborhood across the street. Even if your driving records are better, you're still paying more in insurance. So all of these things, they all have a little chip here, a little chip there, and all together has an effect. Just if you have time, watch it. Tricia Rose discussing how structural racism works, and it's very revealing. Here's another one another stat here. If black households held a share of the national wealth in proportion to their share of the U.S. population, it would amount to 12.68 trillion in household wealth altogether, rather than the actual sum of 2.54 trillion. So the total racial wealth gap is therefore 10.14 trillion, and that comes
It's like
from
4 to
Vanessa
1.
Williamson. Sorry?
It's a 4 to 1 ratio.
Yeah, that is from Vanessa Williamson from the Brookings Institute. And the average net wealth gap between white and black households is again, I guess I have this slide twice, but that's 800. So, not only that, the tax code is greatly affecting things, and here's how. There's a regressive tendency in the last couple of decades where the tax code has become more regressive, and it affected the black population disproportionately. Marginal tax rate reduced from 92%, which it was in the 1950s, to 37% today. And that means that the people at the top of the wealth scale are much richer today than before. And of course, that also breaks down along racial lines. The tax benefit for home ownership held upper middle class white citizens disproportionately more than blacks in the black population. So because there's less people in the African American community that own homes, of course, if you give tax breaks to homeowners, you're disproportionately benefiting the other population. Local property tax, which I mentioned, local property tax assessment is disproportionately biased against black homeowners. Also, tax breaks for the elderly and retirement plans do not benefit the black population as much due to shorter life expectancy. And that's another thing. Why is life expectancy shorter for black people? That's a whole other story. But nevertheless, this is another economic impact. And also, black families are more likely to pay marriage penalties. So that's just talking about the tax issue. But so we have to deal with these problems, and I think it's going to be a very interesting debate about reparations, how much reparations, how they're done. There's various things that can be done. One of them is baby bonds, so you don't have the upfront investment, but rather the reaping the benefit from the future, which may make more sense when we're talking about this time when we have really huge priorities to address, such as global climate change, and problems of tremendous magnitude where our survival is at stake. So that's one idea that has floated. A wealth tax is going to be very critical. Again, going back to the type of tax that was common in the 50s, in order to, and it's interesting to note here that when you do the tax code, the tax wealth tax, that by itself, just the fact that you're increasing the tax on the top population, you're improving, reducing the disparity, the gap, the wealth gap. Not to mention that if you use that revenue towards bettering the lives of poor communities or minorities, then you're doubling that effect, tripling it. It has much more of an effect if you use that money for good. And finally, the estate tax. Estate tax was a estate transfer has been the best way to transfer wealth from generation to generation, and it's gotten less and less tax over the years, and that's an area that would have to be looked at. None of those things are popular, and there's going to be a lot of fighting over that, but I think it's inevitable that if we are to rectify some of these disparities that were caused historically by our ancestors, then that's going to happen. That's going to happen. Keith?
Well, taxes have to be fixed. There's no doubt about it. That's kind of at the heart of everything we want to do, and things have been so messed up by the rich continually getting tax breaks and continually lowering the amount they pay. Now, one issue about it, though, is how do you do it? How do you do it in the right way that is appropriate? Because, a lot of people want to play Robin Hood. And this is going to come up in my presentation with Kashama, because one of the things she wants to do is tax Amazon. And well, I'll mention a little bit of it right now. I'm kind of waiting until I present that. But I'm not okay with that, because I don't like that Amazon pays no federal tax. They need to be paying tax. And, just having the city of Seattle come along with this little tax that we're going to charge you for having employees in our city, for one thing, they're going to move and you're never going to get the money. But the other thing is, it's just a very strange way of, doing things, because there are some things that should be handled at the local issue and some things that should be handled at, the federal issue or the state level. And when it comes to taxes on corporations, that really needs to be done at the federal and state level and not the local level so much. I mean, there's no run, not an absolute rule, but that's one of the things I'll cover. How do you do this in an appropriate way? So, and more later.
That's something, by the way, that people that have been discussing reparations and such made a point of mentioning that it's not necessarily all federal. In this case, it might be better to deal with it federally, but that certainly a lot of the blame for past discrimination has been local, and certainly there's a lot of things that can be done on the local, state, and county level that perhaps are better done that way than federally. So that's an interesting aspect to it.